So, does the DOJ have to turn over all that information that Senator Graham has requested? Well, let's talk about it with the creator of the new podcast, Talking Feds, Harry Litman, and Cal Berkeley law professor John Yoo. Welcome to you both.
Thank you, Shannon.
Okay, so to read a broader quote from Chairman Graham's letter, he says this: the committee is deeply concerned with these discussions and whether they essentially indicate that two of the highest-ranking law enforcement officials in the United States were discussing what amounts to a coup against the president. Harry, they're referring to McCabe's assertions that they talked about the 25th Amendment and whether there would be those willing to go along with that.
I'm sorry, me first?
You, Harry. We'll start with you.
Yeah, Shannon. Okay, well, look, it was a really remarkable, dramatic episode, and maybe the American people need to learn about it. There's two ways in which it seems to me the Graham letter is a little bit politically slanted. It wasn't just the two of them. Those are the two they want to demonize now, but it's clear, John can probably appreciate this, there was an atmosphere of crisis all over the department and real concern after the irregular behavior of the president in firing Comey. So you know, that's one thing to keep in mind. The other thing to realize is that as sort of stunning as this was, it's going to be, I think, a real battle about whether it gets turned over. My best guess, though, I wonder what John thinks about this, is that in fact the whatever assertions of privilege or deliberative privilege that executive makes won't prevail, and this will see the light of day.
Well, and John, I mean, looking at the request from the senator today, I mean, he says he wants to know everybody who was in the meeting, because maybe we've only heard those voices or those names, McCabe, Rosenstein, other names thrown around. He says, I want to know everybody who was there, and he's given him until March 29th to turn over all the info.
That's right. I mean, it wasn't all hands on. Oh, I'm sorry. Look, I've got an earpiece. Go ahead.
John, Harry could talk. Harry could talk for the whole show. Come on.
Yes, he could.
I feel bad interrupting him here. But look, anyone who thinks, look, there's a lot of controversy, disruption in the Justice Department after Comey's firing. But anyone who thinks in the Justice Department that the 25th Amendment applied, that President Trump was actually, under the terms of the Constitution, unable to discharge the powers and duties of the office, ought to have his head examined. And I hope Lindsey Graham's about to do that. I think that, I wouldn't go far as say it's a coup, but I think you had an unconstitutional use of the 25th Amendment. If people think Trump's a spy, then the avenue for that, correcting that, is impeachment, not to claim or pretend that Trump's somehow medically unfit and removing him from office. Second, and this goes also to Harry's point, I agree, I could see the FBI or the Justice Department claiming executive privilege, but you know who can waive executive privilege and force all those people to testify? President Trump. Yep. All President Trump has to do is say, I'm not invoking privilege. Go up and testify and tell Congress everything that happened and everybody who was in the room.
Okay, and now
it would be a bizarre claim of executive privilege because it's not helping the president in his deliberations. I would also just say coup seems a loaded term to me as well. They did bandy about the 25th Amendment. They bandied about everything. But
wearing a wire.
All we know is it was a genuine quandary. What do we do here? This is kind of crazy.
Okay, well, just a note I want to make, too, that the chairman is also, Senator Lindsey Graham, asked for a second special counsel. He thinks that it's time to dig into how the DOJ and FBI handled the Hillary Clinton email investigation, because the more we get information released from Lisa Page and Peter Strzok and others, it raises all new questions about deals that were made and all kinds of things. So we'll see if he gets that special counsel or these documents. But, gentlemen, come back because we always have more to talk about. Perry and John, great to see you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Shannon.
President Trump poised to use his first veto after the Republican-controlled Senate voted to block his national emergency declaration yesterday. 12 Republicans voting with Democrats in a rare bipartisan rebuke of the president, citing a constitutional issue.
It's a question about the balance of power that is core to our Constitution. This is not about the president or about border security.
To me, this statute allows the president to use military construction money in a national emergency, and I think we have one at the border.
It shouldn't be so unusual for members of the president's own party to stand with us and hold him to account when he does wrong, especially a president who so overreaches. But I'm thankful that Republican senators did the right thing.
Kevin Corke is live at the White House this morning. Kevin, good morning to you.
Morning, Sandra. Now, we don't know precisely when that resolution will make its way to the president's desk here at the White House today, but when it does, we're pretty confident he'll not only talk about it, but very probably he'll even show the power of the pen on camera. Again, no guarantees, but that is certainly possible. We do expect to see the president traveling just a bit. Again, as we take a look inside the numbers, this will be his very first use of the power of the veto pen. And for those keeping score, that would be far fewer than his predecessors, although, to be fair, he had a GOP-controlled House during his first 2 years in office, as you see there, President Reagan, with 78, which is pretty incredible. The president this time will be rejecting a bipartisan effort. He said this on Twitter, quote, "I look forward to vetoing the just-passed Democrat-inspired resolution, which would open borders while increasing crime, drugs, and trafficking in our country. I thank all of the strong Republicans who voted to support border security and our desperately needed wall." I promise to give you more granular information and detail as I get it. But again, we expect it'll probably happen here today, Sandra. And when it does, I'll be here for you. But for now, back to you.
We know you're on it for us. Kevin Cork, thank you.
So what do politics have to do with the Manafort cases, especially this new round of charges dropped today? Let's talk about it with tonight's Power Panel. Fox News contributor Leslie Marshall, former DOJ prosecutor Jim Trusty, and Fox News contributor, former Chief Assistant U.S. Attorney Andrew McCarthy. Great to see all of you tonight.
Hi, Shannon.
You too.
All right, Jim, I'll start with you. This indictment today, District Attorney Vance here in Manhattan says this, quote, "No one is beyond the law in New York." What's this all about?
Yeah, it's pretty disturbing, I think. I hate to be on a panel with Andy McCarthy and say anything bad about New York. But this is a circumstance where, look, prosecutors are supposed to go where the evidence leads them. They may have a very strong, justifiable case, but to roll it out in a fashion where you're picking a political fight and saying this will stop the pardon from working, I think that's actually a bad day for prosecutors no matter what your politics.
Yeah, just so folks understand, the federal charges, the president could offer him a pardon. He says he's not even thought about it. It's not on his brain right now. He feels bad for Manafort, but that's not a conversation he's having. State charges are something different. But, you know, when you look at the totality of what happened today for Manafort, it's not a good day to be him. But, Leslie, top Democrats in the Senate are actually divided on the sentence he got. You heard Senator Blumenthal there saying, like, listen, he got away with it. On the other side, Senator Dianne Feinstein, who says, listen, I put people behind bars. I know what it's like to do time in jail, and this is actually a significant sentence. Where do you come down on it, Leslie?
Well, today in the green room earlier, Judge Napolitano and I were kind of taking bets as to what she would do with a maximum 10 years. And I had said 8, and it came pretty close to that. But quite frankly, there are a lot of people, left and right, that felt his former sentencing was extremely lenient. And they weren't surprised when they had the foreshadowing from the judge talking about the financial means that his family has, talking about excuses that he has made, and also talking about the fact he hadn't written a letter to her. I think she was foreshadowing the fact that she was going to be very tough. But also, she could have been tougher because she did have a combination of, he could have had concurrency and, 100% or not, and she chose to kind of split the difference on that. So I don't think she was as hard as him as some expected.
So, Andy, what do you make? As Jim said, you're a New Yorker. You have practiced law and been a prosecutor in this jurisdiction here. What do you make of these new state charges against Manafort, and what's motivating them?
Yeah. Well, I guess first, I was a federal prosecutor in New York. I think what the state did today was a disgrace. And I think they know that under New York state law, Shannon, it was wrong. Actually, New York state follows what's known as equitable double jeopardy. And what that means is, if someone's already been prosecuted on something that arises out of the same facts, you're not supposed to prosecute them in New York a second time. And in this instance, I know your earlier report said the cases are unrelated. They actually are not unrelated. The bank fraud in New York that was charged today arises out of the same transactions that were involved in Mueller's prosecution in Virginia. So this is a case that New York ordinarily wouldn't bring, and they've obviously only brought it for political purposes to block a pardon, which, if you step back and think about it, if this weren't such a prosecution fraught with politics, we'd be saying, why is the state of New York watering down the civil liberties protections of New Yorkers just to stick it to Trump and Manafort? I mean, I just think that's outrageous. As for what happened today in the sentencing, you know, I know a lot of criticism's been leveled at the judges because the sentencing could have been more severe. A lot of people think it should have been more severe. The reason that this sentencing today was capped at 10 years is because Mueller's special prosecutor's office manipulated the conspiracy statutes. Manafort should have been looking at a 20-year conspiracy count for money laundering and a 20-year conspiracy count for witness tampering. Mueller capped each count at 5 years, so the judge was stuck at a ceiling of 10 years, and this is the kind of thing I think Mueller has done throughout the investigation. They filed charges with these, overwhelming, sensational press releases, and then they plead the cases out to a song, and everybody ends up thinking, well, the people must have pled guilty to the cases as advertised, and usually that's just not the case.
I want to make sure that we touch on the transcripts that were released of former FBI lawyer Lisa Page, who was caught up in the texting with Peter Strzok, and the testimony that she essentially gave that said they were looking at pursuing potential charges against Hillary Clinton with gross negligence in handling classified information, that kind of thing. And basically she says they got the message from the DOJ like, not going to happen. Jim, what do you make of it?
Yeah, very disturbing again. I mean, what I would say is, no matter what your political stripes, you should care about process. I think a lot of people focus on results of legal investigations, results at sentencing, what the numbers look like. But the process is so important in terms of getting justice. And right now, there's still very fair questions, again, no matter what your political stripe, about the differences between the Clinton probe and the Trump probe. What happened with the FISA court? Who knew that there were misstatements? There's questions like Bruce Orr meeting with a decommissioned informant long after that guy's been fired by the FBI that still haven't been satisfactorily answered. So they may not see light in a courtroom, and it may be that only Congress, with kind of the speeches in place of cross-examination, will look at it. But somehow, somebody, someday, needs to really drill down on the originations of these cases and the bias that infected them.
Well, we continue to get a drip of information. I assume that will continue to our Power Panel. Come back and discuss it. Thank you all for your time tonight.
Sure. Thanks.
Thank you.